The glittering summit of Elias's success was visible from every field in the valley, but the perilous trail leading up was known only to two souls, and only one truly remembered the cost. In the ancient village of Stonecroft, the name Elias had become synonymous with fortune and ingenuity. He owned the great grist mill, a massive turning wheel of prosperity that ground the town's grain faster and finer than anyone before him, earning him the enviable title of the Miller of Gold. On market days, Elias strode through the square in boots polished until they gleamed like chestnuts, his shoulders square and his gaze confident, accepting the handshakes and the admiring glances that followed him like a loyal shadow. The townsfolk whispered of his lucky stars, his sharp mind, and his unyielding ambition. They saw the grand house built of sturdy fieldstone, the new mantel of carved wood, and the full pantry. But not one of them ever spoke of the thin, fraying thread that stitched that success together, the thread that belonged entirely to his wife, Martha. Everyone saw Elias the conqueror. No one saw Martha the sentinel. For the outside world, the mill was Elias's singular triumph, a monument to a man's sheer will. They recalled the early days when he arrived with little more than a strong back and a dream, and they saw how he had, through sheer grit, tamed the river's current to turn his wheel. Elias, too, often fell into this simple, comforting narrative, basking in the glow of his self-made legend. When he spoke, it was of the long hours, the risks he took securing the loan, and the ingenuity of his design. The path to the mill was well worn by those seeking his advice or his grain, but the path to his inner life, the quiet corner of his mind where the true debts were tallied, remained dusty and untouched. He carried the pride of his success, yet paradoxically, he also carried a growing weariness, a burden he believed he bore alone. The truth of the success, however, lay in the dark hours the town never witnessed, in the small unseen labor of Martha. While Elias was often gone before the sun touched the hills, she was already stoking the fire, not just for warmth, but for the precise, consistent heat needed to dry the newly harvested grain that Elias brought home late, often after midnight. She never complained when her own sleep was interrupted by the smell of damp sacks or the hurried tap of Elias's boots. Her hands, though smooth and soft to the touch, were perpetually busy, not in the mill's noisy glory, but in the silent efficiency of the small stone cottage. She was the mill's true accountant, tracking every transaction in tiny cramped script beneath the dim light of a tallow lamp, often redoing the sums Elias had too quickly scribbled, ensuring every penny was saved and every debt was honored. As the years passed and the success mounted, Elias's acknowledgement of Martha's role dwindled. He saw her work not as a partnership, but as the expected duty of a good wife. He saw the meals ready, the clothes mended, and the ledger balanced, but he failed to see the exhaustion that settled in the corners of her eyes, the exhaustion born of constantly putting his dream and the demands of the mill ahead of her own rest, her own interests, and even their shared time. Her sacrifices were quiet acts of subtraction from her own life, the deferment of having children until the mill was stable, the giving up of her only inherited silver locket to pay for a crucial gear replacement, the many nights she sat alone by the fire, simply waiting. Elias had conquered the mountain, but Martha had packed the necessary provisions for the entire climb, often going without her own share. One dreary autumn, despite his wealth, Elias felt a cold hollow settle in his chest. His success tasted like sawdust, dry and without nourishment. The pride was replaced by a gnawing isolation, the feeling that he had won a battle no one else truly understood. He decided he needed counsel, not from a priest or a merchant, but from old man Samuel, a sage who lived high on the mountain slope, known for speaking only simple, undeniable truths. After a long, steep climb that mirrored the forgotten struggles of his early years, Elias found Samuel sitting on a weathered bench, splitting kindling with slow, meditative strokes. Elias presented his burden to the old man, speaking with a practiced eloquence about his lonely struggle. "Samuel," Elias sighed, gesturing back towards the prosperous valley, "I have built a masterpiece, yet I feel like a husk. The world sees the gold, but I feel the weight of every stone laid, every sleepless night. I am grateful for my fortune, but the price of this solitary conquest has cost me my peace. Why do I feel so alone in this grand accomplishment?" He finished, spreading his hands, expecting Samuel to praise his effort and console his isolation. Samuel did not look up from the simple act of splitting wood. He simply pointed his calloused finger at a smooth, gray stone resting beside the fire pit. "Elias, look at that stone. It is perfectly rounded, flawless, like the finest glass. It is a river stone polished by the current for perhaps 1,000 years." Samuel finally looked at Elias, his eyes deep and knowing. "Tell me, did the river stone polish itself? Did the water alone turn it from a rough pebble to the beauty you see now?" Elias hesitated, realizing the simplicity was a trap. "No," Samuel continued softly. "The water is only the mover. The stone achieves its polish only because it is held steady by the surrounding sediment, the invisible sand, the stabilizing mud, and the countless tiny pebbles that absorb the relentless battering of the current. They hold the river stone still, century after century, so that the water can do its work." Samuel laid down his axe, the sound echoing the finality of his words. "You, Elias, are the river stone, and the mill of gold is the water's ceaseless flow. You took the battering, and you are the one who gleams. But Martha is the sediment. She is the quiet force that held you steady so that you would not be swept away or shattered. When you spoke of your lonely struggle, you forgot the fasts she shared with you when you thought you ate alone the warmth of the fire she maintained while you were cold, and the simple truth that a man who conquers a mountain must trust the one who guards the base camp with the most precious supplies, your peace, your children's well-being, and your honor." The old man's gaze was gentle but firm. "The unseen sacrifices are not just supportive, they are foundational. You built the mill, but she built the ground upon which the mill rests. Your success story hides her constancy." The words struck Elias not like a harsh rebuke, but like a sudden cleansing rain. He saw his success not as a solitary peak, but as a shared landscape. He realized the loneliness he felt was not from bearing a burden alone, but from failing to acknowledge the partner who bore half the weight in silence. His climb had been glorious, but his vision had been narrow. Without another word, Elias stood, bowed deeply to Samuel, and began the quick descent, his heart no longer heavy with false isolation, but lightened by genuine gratitude. He no longer saw the mill as his triumph, but as their legacy. Elias did not stop at the market square or boast of his latest counsel. He went straight to his hearth, where Martha was finally taking a quiet moment, mending a tear in his rough wool coat. He knelt before her, not as the miller of gold, but as Elias, the man who had finally seen. He did not ask her to share his success, but for the much greater gift of forgiveness for his blindness. He acknowledged every quiet act, every delayed dream, and every sleepless night she had spent in the shadow of his ambition. It was only then, seeing the genuine warmth return to Martha's tired eyes, that Elias finally felt the true, enduring peace that came from shared accomplishment. The unseen sacrifices were not obstacles to be overcome, but the invisible, sacred bonds that made the victory matter. Remember, the greatest achievements are often built upon a foundation of silent support and unseen sacrifice. Let us never forget to turn away from the gleaming river stone to truly see and thank the faithful sediment that held it still. If this message resonated with you, please like and subscribe the channel. And I truly want to know, what unseen sacrifice do you think is the hardest for people to recognize in a successful person's life? Comment your opinion below,